Hey, y'all, I'm Cody. It's time to catch up. Grab your headphones and fill your cup. Sports and life, I've got stories to share. Sit back, relax like you just don't care.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Catch Up with Cody podcast. I'm your host, as always, Cody. We have a special guest, Kevin, today. Thank you for taking time to come on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so I kind of met you through Jeff and watching your guys' podcast and everything. You guys are big Detroit fans as well as I am, so kind of cool to see that. And honestly, big reason why I got into podcasting as well. I know there's a couple different ones out there, but you guys were definitely one that kind of got me into doing this. So thank you for that.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I know it's been great, getting to doing everything with the podcasting. I know we'll get into a little bit of the specifics about the background and the history of how I got into it, but it's definitely been it's been a lot of fun for me doing, and then it's been great to see you as you start your journey and get started with everything. It's been cool to follow along and help support you the best I can. So it's been great.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I know I still have a lot to learn, and it's not as easy as I thought it was going to be, which I mean is good and bad. I mean, it's like, these big podcast people, it's like I give them props. I mean, even you guys, I mean, the way your guys' audio, video, all that stuff sounds. Actually, before I got on, I had Jamie do a test run with me, and she goes, "Your video's all pixelated." I'm like, "I'm working with a $20 webcam right now. I'm trying the best I can, but yeah, it's I mean, they say you got to make money or spend money to make money, so we'll see. But right now, it's just a hobby, so I think everything I got right now is good enough. So, but tell the viewers and everything a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got into podcasting and everything like that.
Yeah, so it was a little bit after college I got started with podcasting. So I think so. The podcast that you're referencing, that me and Jeff were doing there for a while, is the Lions Grid. So it's a podcast focused on the Detroit Lions. And a little bit on the NFL at large, but specifically kind of trying to look at everything through the lens of Lions fans. And I really got started with the process. I had a buddy from high school who, and of course I know Jeff from high school too, but a different friend through high school. And he went to Central Michigan. He got, he went through, he got his degree in broadcasting, and like his dream was to go on and to be like doing sports radio. Like that's what he wanted to do. And one of the things that I really enjoy about your podcast that you do here with Catching Up with Cody is, you talk about mental health and things like that. And I'm not going to give away too many of the details because they are like his story, so I don't want to like tread on like what he had going on. But needless to say, he did have some mental health challenges, and that kind of like derailed that for him. Like he got his degree from Central, he wanted to go into sports radio, but he just that avenue wasn't available to him in that like traditional route of like going to like a 97.1 The Ticket or something like that. That just wasn't going to be an option for him. So he had invited me to join him for the podcast, and that was before we even had the Lions Grid name. So for me, like I joined because I've always been a big fan of football. I played football in high school. I was lucky enough to be at Michigan State during like the height of Mark D'Antonio's time. I got to see Kirk Cousins, I got to see Le'Veon Bell. I got to see them win the Big Ten championship and win the Rose Bowl against Stanford. So like the height of Michigan State football, I was there for. So I've always been a big fan of football, and I have a lot of just retain a lot of useless football knowledge from that. So it was kind of easy for me to jump in and talk football with him. And at the time, I was actually not a Detroit Lions fan. So I grew up being a Green Bay Packers fan. My grandpa's from Wisconsin and everything like that. So I always grew up liking the Packers. It helped that the Lions were they were bad during, the time I was young, and the Packers, they won a Super Bowl during that time. So it was kind of easy to like them because they were, winning and the Lions were having their struggles. But really, over this 8 years of doing the Lions Grid, I have fully transitioned from being a Packers fan who was talking about the Detroit Lions to being a Detroit Lions fan, which is weird because, when I first started, it was just as Matt Patricia was coming in as the head coach. So like that time with the Lions was not a good time for Lions football. And so it was, I got to be there for that. And it started out with me kind of like just being, a Packers fan, kind of like poking fun at the Lions and being like, it's just the same old Lions stuff, to me really starting to recognize the amount of pain that Lions fans go through with some of the stuff that's happened in the Lions football history, and to really be coming up with an admiration for the team as, Dan Campbell kind of took hold, and we really saw this team really blossom into what they are now. So it's definitely been like a little bit of a roller coaster there, but the podcasting, again, got into it to kind of help reconnect with an old friend. And then, I think with mental health, obviously there's a lot of challenges. There can be ups and downs. And so, he would kind of come and go as my co-host throughout the time. And I know from watching some of your other content, Cody, you've mentioned, that it's more enjoyable to do with someone else, right? Like when it's just you talking, it can get kind of old.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the thing that I'm, struggling with sometimes with doing the podcast. That's kind of why I took a break for a little bit. And, I used to do one with my buddy too. So it was it was a lot easier. It was nice. Even the behind the scenes stuff of like editing and everything, he did all that stuff. And, I give him huge props too. I mean, at first I'm like, it can't be that hard to do edits and this and that. And it's tough. So, I mean, I know there's a lot of apps and stuff out there now that can help, make the process easy, but it's still tough. And yeah, I feel like, I'm a big sports fan too and everything like that, but I feel like in between, with your podcast with the sports, and there's a couple mental health podcasts out there that I really listen to, and that's really what got me into it is just, mental health, I feel like relates to everybody.
Mhm.
And so that's why I kind of picked both of those, the sports, it gives me something, consistently to talk about. Not that mental health isn't something that needs to constantly be talked about, but that side of things kind of makes it easy in that portion. And then the relatability of mental health. So that's why I kind of was like, what's something that I like and that I can get a decent amount of people to relate with. And that's really what made me come up with both of that. And even the networking thing with podcasting. I mean, talking with you now, doing an episode. I was on an episode of another podcast 2 weeks ago now. Actually, I already got invited on the second episode in their studio. So that to me is what's really cool too, is the networking portion. I mean, I've met people that lived states away that I would never have met unless I started doing this. So it's a cool hobby that I started, and hopefully it turns into more than that. But yeah, super excited that you're on. I know you sent me some things too that you wanted to talk about sports wise. So, let's kind of get into it with the Lions since we'll piggyback off of that. Unfortunately, a disappointing season, not the season we were looking for, but I kind of feel like this might be the reality check that the Lions needed. I know, again, injuries just derailed our team. But yeah, I mean, what's your pros and cons of the season? What did you like this season? What are there things that for sure they need to kind of change up in the offseason here?
Yeah, so I think really the disappointment for last season wasn't because of just a single thing, right? There were many things that went wrong with this team, and I think that's it was sort of the sum of the whole as opposed to just pointing to a single item and saying, well, this was the reason why. You already talked about the injuries. We had a revolving door at secondary. And I think the thing that is actually one of the biggest concerns for me heading into this next season based off of last season is the injuries specifically to our safeties, right? I think Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph, when they're healthy, I will take that safety duo over any other duo in the NFL. Like they change the game for the Lions defense. They are problems that the other team needs to scheme around. And them not being on the field for the Lions, it changes what that defense looks like tremendously. And unfortunately, Branch had the Achilles injury. Kirby Joseph, his knee injury has definitely been we're not getting as mmany details about that. I know they asked Dan Campbell down at the combine for the draft about what his status was and what his availability will look like for next season, and he wasn't able to give a really strong answer. And that's kind of what concerns me, is that I'm not sure if we might have seen like peak Kirby Joseph. We might not ever see that again. And that's something to me that is concerning, because I don't think you can like when he was out there and it was healthy, he was great. Like he was hands down one of the best safeties in the league. So, and then losing, Brian Branch should be able to come back from his Achilles injury, but this season it's going to take him this season to get his legs under him, and then probably next season, 2027, he might be able to get back to the caliber he was at. So, I think the sad thing for me is that, again, I think they're the best safety duo in the league when they're healthy, but I don't know if we're ever going to see them both out there healthy again for a meaningful chunk of the season, which is something that has me worried.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And in the Kirby Joseph injury, it's sad. I mean, I know there's not a lot of details or anything out there, but from what I've been hearing, it's a crazy injury. So hopefully he can come back from that. Um, but yeah, it just seems like our defense, especially at the corners, has just been an absolute nightmare these last couple of years. And
Yeah, it really
I don't know
seems like
what it
they've
is.
just been signing guys, from week to week and sticking them out there. And to their credit, they have done a good job with doing that, even with, again, one of those factors that I think contributed to the season last year. Obviously, we lost our offensive and defensive coordinator. So with Aaron Glenn going to the Jets to be their head coach, Kelvin Shepard stepped in and did a decent job considering what he was dealing with. But I think, again, you start to look at all of the factors. We had the secondary injuries, we had the coaching changes, a big change also, speaking of players that are hard to replace, Frank Ragnow as the center, like losing him had a big impact on that offensive line. Zeitler leaving in free agency, lost to some of that consistency in play that we had next to the center at the guard position. So there were just so many things that kind of came together as the perfect storm that really it felt like, and then also just inside of the division, everybody got better, minus maybe the Vikings. The Vikings might have took a step back, but
Yeah.
the Packers, the Bears, both improved. So it just culminated in a disappointing season. And I think the most disappointing thing too, just even without those factors, is if the Lions were able to beat the Vikings on Christmas Day, like dropping that game, they were so close to being able to get into the playoffs. And then if you get in, who knows what can happen. But I think, one of the things about Dan Campbell's Lions that I've really appreciated is that typically when they are given an opportunity, like a window to do something, they usually step up and they do it, like they deliver. And then this season was kind of the opposite of that. They had that chance to be able to put themselves in a position to succeed, and we just didn't see them get it done like we have in the other seasons. Particularly when they made it to the NFC Championship game.
Yeah, and that's the thing that worries me too is like unfortunately like we're going in the wrong direction. We went from a good record and then we're just falling apart. Um and that falls on everybody. I mean, the NFC Championship a couple years ago and last year. I mean, there's so many opportunities and it's I feel like as a Lions fan, not that we're greedy, but it's like we were right there for 2 years in a row for sure. So it's like, well, you haven't been to this point in ever. You've never been there. So why not, I guess take risks as in like, play smart. Don't sometimes, yeah, like the fourth down things, I get it. You got to do, but those are the little examples of like, just take the points when they come because you never know. And we saw it in the NFC Championship game a couple years ago. You never know when those field goals or that touchdown or whatever. You never know when those little things are going to help you in the long run. So I don't know. I'm a little nervous with, you know, losing now again the offensive coordinator.
Mhm.
And I don't know. I haven't really heard too much about our new offense coordinator and everything like that. So I'm a little worried on that one. I think our defense was fine. But yeah, it's tough because yeah, unfortunately when we're taking a dive, the rest of the division is on their way upward. And it's tough to see Ben Johnson leave, and then it's even tougher to see him just
Have
do what he did this year.
Yeah,
So
have immediate success with the Bears
yeah,
of all the
and
teams.
and, and that just shows that he's a good coach. Um, And it just, I mean, he really was the reason that the Lions were as good as they were. And I mean, even in the year turnaround that he's been there, he's already shown that the Bears are a good team. And that's with, I mean, a lot of the people that are there from last year. So, I mean, he turned Caleb Williams from a bust into almost an MVP type caliber player. So it's all system, it's all everything like that. So hopefully we can get that figured out. But I don't know. Defense definitely needs to be looked at. I think Hutch needs somebody on that other side, but we'll see. Hopefully they spend a little bit of money this year and draft well. But I don't know. Do you picture us having another 9-8, 500 season, or do you see us kind of going back in the upward trend?
I probably see us going in the upward trend just because, with the way that we finished the season, we're going to get a weaker schedule than we had last year, right? We're coming off back-to-back NFC North titles where, we were getting the harder schedule. So now that we aren't first, that's going to impact the scheduling. So I think that'll help us out. But I think last year, if you looked around at the NFL, just because you are going to be playing weaker teams doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're going to have a better record, or that you're going to have the outcome you're looking for. And even a little bit, you look at the Patriots, they made it all the way to the Super Bowl, and I think they had a pretty, they had a pretty advantageous matchup all the way through. They kind of got lucky. They caught the Broncos after the injury to the quarterback. And why am I blanking on his name?
Bo Nix.
Bo Nix, yeah.
Bo Nix, yeah.
Bo Nix got hurt with that ankle injury. They didn't have to go up against the Bills. So they kind of got the easy route to the playoffs through for the AFC side of things. And then when they went up against Seattle, they kind of, it felt kind of like they got exposed. A lot of the issues and flaws that we sort of knew about that Patriots team as they were going into the playoffs, that got kind of downplayed because of the victories they had. They suddenly came back to the forefront in that Super Bowl matchup against the Seahawks. So, could the Lions be in a similar place where, because maybe they're playing some weaker opponents, it helps, get them into the playoffs and then put them in a position where they could go on a little bit of a run, but then maybe they get exposed at some point for, that could potentially be something. A lot's going to depend to your point about what happens in free agency and in the draft. Brad Holmes has had some really great draft picks, and then he's had some reaches that really haven't turned into anything. So I definitely believe in him and Dan Campbell and want to see what they're going to do. But at the same time, I think there has been, you should never fully commit and just take what someone is saying. But I think, especially with some of the things we have seen in recent seasons, there is enough that we've seen. A lot of great hits, like Jahmyr Gibbs has been a fantastic player for the Lions. And, his 49 touchdowns in 49 games is just, it's historic and is crazy. But, then there's Christian Mahogany, who we don't know what type of role he is going to be playing on the team moving forward. So, it's, we'll have to see how things turn out. We don't really have a crystal ball and can't really figure out exactly how things are going to play out. But, there's, excited to see what happens in the draft. I think a big thing that we haven't talked about is what's going to happen with the offensive line, specifically when it comes to Taylor Decker. I know he's planning on coming back this season, but the Lions are still potentially looking at addressing that with either free agency, I've heard now, or potentially in the draft. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And I don't know, I'm just hoping for a good year. And I mean, I don't know. I know they keep throwing around, the Max Crosbys and all these names, but I don't know. I think there's just more money that we can spend somewhere else in order to make the team better. But I mean, what do you think? Do you think we should bring in a big name guy like that, or kind of spread the money around to, different parts of the team?
Yeah, I think the business side, the cap side of thing, is definitely something that we have to keep an eye on. I know there's the ability for Jared Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown to reschedule their contracts to give us a little bit more cap room to play with this offseason, but I don't think as of yet that has happened. I know everyone's thinking it will, and I imagine it will, but until it actually occurs, we're not going to know how much of a war chest we have to go into free agency. And I think the Lions are kind of at an interesting point right now. They've definitely rewarded a lot of the guys who have performed for them during this era with some contract extensions, but the problem is you can't pay everybody.
No.
And they have paid a lot of people. They have, but that definitely eats up the availability of funds to go out and get some of these players, whether it be through free agencies or even in trades, like for Max Crosby. So I I think that's one thing that will be interesting to see because we haven't seen too much of that yet out of Brad Holmes. Like he does trade, but most of those trades have been around draft picks and things like that. Uh, we haven't seen him be too much of like that financial operative with making things work with contracts. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, and definitely not something that I'm really like fluent in. I can definitely watch the games and have an appreciation for the roster moves and things like that, but being able to break in the dollar signs there for figuring out exactly how they might be able to spend some of this stuff. I think that's going to be important because if you look at teams like the Eagles or even the Seahawks, they kind of rebuilt their team here recently. A big part of that is the financial side of it. The cap space and finding a way to build your team, retain the players that you need to from a foundational standpoint, but then bring in the talent that you need to supplement that. So that's, I think, the big challenge for the Lions is how do they get better with the cap space they have? And that means if they don't do it through free agency, that does mean they kind of have to lock in with the draft, right, and hit on those picks they take.
Yeah, and like you said before, there's some times that Brad Holmes has hit on some picks, and then there's other times that he's missed. But yeah, I mean, we'll have to see how it goes. I didn't even realize that the draft combine was. I think it's this week or this weekend. Um,
Yeah, I think this
that
first
that
weekend of
came up
March. Yeah.
pretty quick too. So yeah, I mean, that's why Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell are in the position that they are because they know how to run a team and build a team. And I don't know. I said it before, like when we just started getting good, that our window I think is like a 3 to 4 year window,
Mhm.
and I'm still standing on it. I don't know. I think after this year, if we're still down, then might be time to reevaluate everything again. But we'll have to see and go from there. But you know, kind of piggybacking off of Detroit teams, on the opposite end, actually, the Detroit Pistons. Um, I'm totally shocked. Did not see this coming at all. I mean, I'm a huge Pistons fan, have been for a long time. Um, but if you told me in the beginning of the season that we were going to be number one at the end of February, I would have said you were crazy because I mean, it's almost like the same exact team from last year, if not the year that we only won 14 games. So again, obviously coaching helps with JB Bickerstaff, but um, I mean, going into before the season started, did you see this being an option of where we're at as a, Detroit Pistons team, or were you kind of at the same thing, mediocre? I was even pulling for, fifth, sixth, seventh seed right there. I mean, I was happy with that. So, but yeah, where were you kind of at before the season started, and where are you at kind of now with us being up at the top?
Yeah, I mean, opening it up to just Detroit sports in general, I definitely wouldn't have thought that the Pistons would be the team that are the closest to potentially competing in a championship. That's definitely a surprise to me. Certainly thought, hopefully that they would get back into the playoffs this year and then, hopefully do be able to go on a little bit of a run or, get a series win, something a little bit better than they did last season and kind of show that growth and continue to get that playoff experience is kind of what I was kind of my best case scenario. And obviously, they're positioning themselves to have a good run in the playoffs, but they still need to do it. But everything we've seen out of the team so far makes me, there's no reason for me to think that they're just suddenly going to fall off the face of the earth when the playoffs come around. So it's definitely exciting. And again, it's kind of surprising that the Pistons are that sort of team from Detroit that might be the closest to actually getting another banner here.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, again, if you would have told me at the beginning of the, all the sports seasons, you're like, hey, pick a team that you think is going to be, at the top. Definitely Detroit. The Pistons were not on that list, but I don't know. They're playing well. It's kind of funny to see that we have the New York Knicks number, especially how it played out last year in the playoffs. Um, we still unfortunately don't have that home playoff win. So hopefully that will happen this year. Um, but yeah, I mean, I know we had a tough game against San Antonio just the other night, but and tonight we have the Thunder. The problem is I heard everybody's out for the Thunder, so that's going to be tough because you can't really judge
Yeah, it
how
loses
we
some of its
play.
yeah, it loses some of its effectiveness as a measuring stick when the best players are out. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what worries me with San Antonio. I mean, obviously Wemby is a generational talent, and I mean, but those are the teams that we need to beat. It's obviously in the playoffs because that's how you get to the next round. But in this regular season, if we lose to these top teams, that's what worries me going into the playoffs. Is like, are we just a regular season team, or are we that team that can get over the hump and get to potentially the NBA Finals? Which is crazy that that's even the talk right now. Um, with Ivy being gone, that was kind of a sad trade that happened. I know it's a business decision and everything, but I don't know because what we got in return right now is not. I don't see what the point was. I don't know how much you've like looked into it or seen how the trade's been panning out so far, but I don't know. I really would have liked to see Ivy at least stay through the year, um, and then either try to work out a deal or if not, I mean, let the guy walk. But I don't know. I wish we got something more out of that, and it's tough to see even that game against Chicago. I don't know if you watched it or not, but at the end, I mean, all those guys giving Ivy handshakes and hugs. It's
Mhm.
tough to see because realistically, the reason he got traded wasn't really his fault. I mean, coming off a broken leg, you can only expect so much from a guy. I mean, he's young enough, so I'm hoping he can, bounce back in Chicago. They've been comparing him to Derrick Rose already as far as the support and everything that Chicago is going to be giving him, and that's all you can hope for. But yeah, I mean, I guess what's your opinion on these Pistons? Do you think we're gonna make it to the finals, or do you think it's going to be just a regular season and then fall apart type deal?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to say, especially since, to your point, they don't have that postseason home victory yet. So I think there's a lot unknown with this team, and certainly, like you said, you'd certainly feel better if they're putting up wins against, the Spurs and the Thunder. Like if they're winning these games against teams that we know are going to be contenders, it certainly does a little bit to help alleviate that sort of uncertainty about what they might do come postseason time. But with Ivy in particular, I think it's probably for the best for him that I think him going to another team is good. I kind of equate it to similar to like Kyle Van Noy with the Lions, right? Like both showed sparks of having the talent, like the stuff to be stars in the league. But it wasn't until Kyle Van Noy went to New England and then, went to Baltimore that he really started to become a player. He was leading, I think it was 2024, he led the league in sacks. So something crazy that you wouldn't have expected from Kyle Van Noy. But it wasn't until after, his time with the Lions that his career really started to take off. So I was hoping for something similar for Ivy, and we may still see that. I know he's been having some DNPs here so far with the Bulls, but I think as time goes on, hopefully he'll have that chance to sort of get a reset and get his career back going the way that I think that it can be, because he has shown flashes here with the Pistons where he definitely can be an exciting player. Obviously derailed a little bit by the injury, and then just coming back wasn't getting the minutes really to help getting him going here with us. So hopefully he can get things on track with the Bulls, and we'll see him go on to have a good career. But then, yeah, for the Pistons, just in general, I think they have a very high ceiling, but I'm not sure right now, as we've talked about, I'm not sure what the distance between their ceiling and their floor is. It's really hard to get a good feel on that. Are they just a team maybe similar to the Patriots where they're beating up on bad teams, or they're just, having a good fortune and stacking up wins? Or are they going to be a team more like the Seahawks, where they're going to go out there and that defense is gonna win them a championship? We're kind of going to have to wait to see what the answer on that is. But it's hard to say. If I had to, like, how I'm feeling at the moment, I'm definitely feeling more optimistic that it's more so that they are for real and they're going to be a contender, and we're going to see them as the East representative in the finals. But only time will tell if that's true or not.
Yeah, and honestly, it's kind of crazy. I mean, even if we get, even if they just make it to the finals, I mean, even if they get, out of the first round and everything, I
Yeah.
think it'll be a win for Detroit for them. But I mean, even the city deserves even a finals look. I mean, we haven't seen that in forever. Um, you know, I just keep thinking of like all these Detroit teams right now are so good. I just can't imagine once it gets to, even the Wings for playoff time and Pistons for playoff time. Like we saw how Detroit was for the Lions during playoff seasons when we were
Mhm.
finally making it. So it's just it's nice to see. I'm hoping I see his championship soon. Like I don't want to wait another 30, 40 years to see one. Um, but yeah, I think the city deserves it. The teams obviously deserve it. Um, and yeah, I mean, it's like you said with Ivy, it's really a system thing, and it's a system thing with any team. And I was on a podcast the other day, and I was talking about like some players just they fit a system, and that's what works. I mean, JB's system is working for the same guys that we had that Monty William could only win 14 games.
Mhm.
So, it shows a true testament of the players, the coaching, and everything like that. I'm still shocked that Cleveland got rid of him because he was coach of the year, got them to the top. Um, but even that, like with Harden going to Cleveland this year, didn't think that was going to work out, and I don't think they've lost a game since. So it's all about system. It's all about hitting that right time of when you have the momentum and everything like that. Detroit, the Pistons have a game tonight against the Thunder, like I said. So I mean, it'd also be cool to beat the Thunder because it's a win against them. But
Mhm.
I would like to see a full strength team. Um, but this is kind of nice too because it gives Isaiah Stewart like, okay, cool. This was a team or game that we needed you in, but since it's not as hyped up as it was before due to the injuries, um, it's just a nice relaxing day. So I'm hoping
Yeah.
with his suspension, I'm hoping it either well it helps him because of his I know he's had some on and off knee injuries. Hopefully it helps him in that scenario, but I hope it doesn't hurt him as far as dude's been off for like a month, it feels like.
Mhm.
So, and he's still got, I think, 3 or 4 games left in his suspension. So, I don't know. I'm excited. They look like the bad boys team. So, it's kind of nice to see that since, I didn't really get to see that growing up.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of positivity in Detroit. I mean, the Red Wings I think they play Thursday coming up after that break from the
Olympic
Olympics.
break. Yep.
So that's another thing. It's like you're off for 2 weeks. Like, how do you just jump back on the ice and start skating and get right back to where you are? I mean, obviously the whole NHL has to deal with it, so it's not just
Mhm.
us. But I don't know. That's another thing that's tough too. I mean, obviously Larkin's coming off of getting that gold medal, so hopefully that'll just light a fire in him still too. To you got the gold medal, so now let's
Yep.
get that Stanley Cup and bring it home. But I, it's got to be close. We got to be close to getting a championship.
Yeah, I mean, you sort of touched on it. There's definitely a lot of excitement at the moment around Detroit sports. I think, I'm a Michigan State fan, but I will give Michigan credit. The last championship we had around here for Detroit sports fans is Michigan's national football title.
Yep.
So, but we're spoiled, right? There's a lot of teams that feel like they're very close to being able to, if not competing for championships, that they're very close to putting themselves in position to doing so. And there's just a lot of anticipation around that, right? Like, uh, we all want to see it happen. We talked about the Ivy trade, but I know a lot of the conversations out there are, did we do enough? Are people being aggressive enough when going after these championships? You talked about with the Lions about having the 3 to 4 year window. Is Brad Holmes doing enough to capitalize on that? There's always a lot of, I think, second guessing that's going on with the leadership across the different franchises right now because we are so close, and we know, I think to your point earlier too, it's kind of it's the right combination of things have to go right. Like I talked about how like it was a combination of things that went wrong for the Lions last season to actually get to the championship and win the title. You need everything to go right. You need the right coach. You need the right scheme. You need the right players. You need to be able to stay free from injuries. There's so many things that need to go right and need to come together in order for that to happen. And right now, so many of our teams feel like they're so close to being able to get those championships that I think as sports fans, we're kind of spoiled because when we're watching things, like, we're very much a part of all those conversations, which is fantastic. But there's definitely that feeling of like, okay, what do we need to do to get us over the hump? Like, what is going to actually get us to be the champions, whether it be, NFL, NBA, NHL, MLB, like, what is it going to take to do it? And when we see, I think the front offices maybe take a more cautious approach, or maybe they're trying to take that longer view sometimes, it can be a little frustrating, right? Because we're like, well, yeah, we want to be good in 2028, but we'd rather have a championship here now in 2026, 2025. So it's, I think it's hard, right, to balance that as a fan. You're excited because your team is there, but you really want to see them do the things that get you the championship. And it's always hard to know, right? Because you look at so many teams, like what the Packers did trading for Micah Parsons. Like, they went out and tried to make a splash. He got hurt, and of course that kind of, when you look back at it retroactively, doesn't look great for them because they gave up, Kenny Clark and picks, and then Parsons get hurt, and that's going to impact them this season as well. But like, they took a swing, right? And so I think there is that appetite for a lot of Detroit sports fans who, at the moment, that we would rather we want to see teams show that they're really going after those championship wins right now while we're in these windows. And I know before everything happened with, like, the Tigers with the arbitration with Scooble, people were kind of upset that they hadn't really made any roster moves. Now, since the Scooble arbitration, we've added 2 pitchers, Verlander coming back, and the guy from the Astros. So I'm blanking on his name at the moment. But
I know. I was on the podcast the other day, and they were like, the guy from the Astros. I'm like, I can see his face. I just cannot remember what his name is.
Yeah, and I mean, he's going to come in and he's going to be like, we're going to have a great pitching rotation. It would be nice if we could add another bat, or if maybe one of these young guys from the farm system could come up and actually help give us some more offense too. But like, the Tigers are making moves to go after and try and capitalize. They decided not to trade Scooble. They're really kind of committing to going after it this year after a World Series. So, like, there's, I think, a lot of excitement. And with the Pistons, they made the Ivy trade. They didn't really get anything else done before the deadline. But, like, to your point, that trade hasn't, I think it's going to be good for Ivy in the long run, but it didn't really net any positive for, like, the Pistons in terms of this season, at least not yet that we've seen. So it's always, like, a lot is going to be based off of, like, the result, unfortunately. Like, if we go through and we do make it to the finals, that, we're not going to talk about what didn't happen at the trade deadline, but it's that sort of dual-edged sword where it's like, okay, if we don't make it to the finals, though, we are going to be sitting here talking about, come summertime, well, what if they would have done this? Always trying to take a look of seeing of how could we have gotten there if, the result isn't what we wanted. So, but I mean, the cool thing is we get to have a lot of those conversations and feel really optimistic about the fact that the teams will be part of those conversations.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up kind of like the spending and stuff like that, because I feel like, and it's funny because we talked about this before we got on, but it's like, you got to spend money to make money. And I know we were talking about, like, podcasts and stuff, but like, the same rules apply with teams. Like, with the Scooble thing, it's like, this dude is going to get you that. I mean, in all honesty, he's going to get you that World Series ring. So it's like, I get it. And, we talked about it earlier in the show. Like, okay, do you give all this money to one guy instead of separating throughout the team? That's an exception of, like, dude, there's no second guess. Give the guy the money. He's going to be here. He wants to be here, and just give it to him. So I think that's what these teams, I don't know if these owners and GMs they didn't realize that this is where they would be in their respective league. And having the success that they've had, I don't know if that's what's kind of like deterring them from spending money. But even like with the Pistons, like, okay, like you're almost there. So like, trade players and kind of get the pieces that need to get us to the next level. Like, yeah, we trade Ivy, so there goes our future. But like, the return factor, like you said, there was nothing in return that's going to be like, wow, this
Yeah.
this definitely changed everything. And so I think that that's kind of what's stopping these owners and GMs is they're not that they're not surprised of where they're at. But I think like maybe they didn't realize that this is where they would be so early or so late in their, you know, respective leagues. But I think like I'm drawing a blank on the GM for the Pistons right now, but I mean he's already changed the league, you know, for us for sure. Um, but again, like just make that trade to help, or with the Tigers, pay Scooble, bring in some bats, bring in some pitching. Obviously, they did that on the pitching side. So maybe they're going to do this as like a test for the year. You know, let's see how pitching goes, and then next year let's focus on bats. But to me, it's like just focus on both of them right now. Get it done. Get to the World Series or get to the NBA Finals and just win. Once they get that win, I think that will help them. Like, okay, we know what we need, so let's keep continuing to do it. Um, you know, do I see any of the Detroit teams going back to back to back? Probably not. Um, but like just get that one under their belt and just be like, okay, cool, we did it. We know what we needed to do. And I think it'll just take all like the weight off their shoulders of getting into it. You know, I mean, even the Red Wings with Iserman, I mean, he's been here for so long. Like, dude, you played for us. So you know, obviously the leagues are different from back then to now, but like you know what it takes to win. You've been in that predicament. You've been front seat to this, you know, winning culture. So just do that now in this generation of teams. You know, I was talking to somebody on my podcast a couple weeks ago about like baseball and like the minor leagues and the farm system. Like if you have these young kids that are doing good, bring them in. What are you waiting for? I don't know. To me, like, and I've always joked about the Pistons the last couple of years. Like we're always a farm system for the NBA. Like I feel like these guys are so good, so good. We send them off, and then they become superstars or like the top players. It's like, why didn't we do that here? Like, what are we? Why are we farming these players to then just dish them out to the other teams? And I don't know. We got young people all around the sport, so just bring in the young guys and get them in. I mean, even I don't remember if it was last year or the year before for the Red Wings. Like there was a bunch of young people that they're like, we need to bring them in, bring them in, bring them in. You're not going anywhere. Bring them in, get them the experience of being in the league, you know, and go from there.
Yeah, the end result would be the same anyway, so might as well, get them some experience and maybe get their development, give it a little bit of a jump start. And I think too, you brought up an interesting point there. I think a lot of these teams, it seems like maybe I think they're trying to go about building like the organizations the right way so that they can have sustained success. But I think, because it has been such a drought in championships, fans definitely feel like the need of like before you can start worrying about setting up a dynasty like the Kansas City Chiefs, just get one. Like
Yeah.
that's
Yep.
what we want. We want just get one, and then we can worry about what comes next. And it almost feels like there's that disconnect between us as fans because that's very much how I feel. It's like the Lions haven't even shown up in a Super Bowl, so like I don't care if your plan is to build to be appear in 5 in the next 8 seasons. Like just get to one. Like let's just start there, and then we can worry about making sure that we're built to last.
Yeah, and honestly, even as fans of Detroit, like obviously I want to see championships. But honestly, I think there's enough like overall of the fans of Detroit that like if we make it to the finals or we make it to the Super Bowl, like even if we lose, okay, like you said, we've never been to the Super Bowl. So like that gives you a little bit of like a almost like a okay, cool. We made the fans happy. We got to the Super Bowl. We didn't win it. So obviously, you know, they still want us to win it or whatever, but it gives you that cushion of like, okay, now we have 2-3 years to like now we can win it. But like I said, I mean, I was for the Pistons, I was predicting like between 5 and 7 of being in the standings.
Mm-hmm.
You're at number 1. So get the chance to make it to the NBA finals or even like the Eastern Conference finals. And a lot of fans will be like, okay, I'm good with this. You guys are moving in the right direction. Let's keep it up. Obviously, like I said, you know, to cement it would be nice to get that championship, but I think as Detroit fans, like you said, since we've been in such a drought, that even these little things like Eastern Conference Finals, NFC Championship, like those are the things. I mean, look at Detroit, like when we went to the NFC Championship. I mean,
Mhm.
people were partying just for that. Like,
Yeah.
that's all these fans want in Detroit, is to see some sort of progress and success. So to me, as an ownership and general manager, like, this is the city you're like, cool, we have cushion, and one step at a time.
Mhm.
Now we're out of the drought of being bad in Detroit. Now let's get to the next step. And then we can either get the championship, or we can focus on that in the next year or two. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it'll take much for Detroit fans to be excited. I mean, we're already excited, and I mean, the Pistons are number 1 in the league, and the fans are already excited. So
Yeah.
it doesn't take much, just because we haven't seen any success. So to see just that progress, I think, is already enough for these Detroit fans to kind of help the ownership and GM kind of be like, all right, let's focus on our goal, but we're making the fans happy, so that's all we really need to see.
Yeah, it'd be great to see them, go out there and sort of shoot their shot. To your point, it would be great if like we can actually get the championship, but just to see like one of the teams really commit to fully going after it and just making the moves, it would just be, I think we're at that point where it's like, okay, we're close enough. We know like that it's within striking distance. We really just want to see one of these teams take that next step and really try and bring it home. And if it doesn't work out, that's we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But it'd be great to see that effort and just see someone try and swing for the fences.
No, I agree. I mean, even like with the Pistons, like, we make it out of the first round, hang a banger up. We made it out of the first round. I mean, that's all people want to see. So, but yeah, I think everybody hopefully is on the upward trend. Like I said, I'm hoping the Lions didn't already hit their peak, and now we're going down, but I don't know. We'll have to see in these upcoming months, for NBA and NHL, and then, like I said, this offseason with the Lions. So, but yeah, I mean, any other last little things you kind of want to add in there? I love talking sports with anybody, and like I said, especially with you having that Detroit Lions podcast. It's really cool to kind of watch your stuff, and then now talk to you in person, like I said, with that networking stuff. So, but definitely going to want you on more after this off season, and talk more sports, and kind of where we are when we're talking at the end of February, and then come playoff time with all these teams and everything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly appreciate the invitation to be on here. And then, I think one of the superpowers you have has been the networking. Because I know, so thinking back about the journey that I went on with podcasting, the 8 years involved there, a lot of that, there was a lot of growth that happened from, year one to where I was at, year 8. And a lot of that, there was a lot of community building and things like that was happening. So, but one thing that I wasn't very like good at, there was networking in the terms of, I had Jeffrey on, and, I had my other co-host, and my dad would join us occasionally and things like that. And then we did build it. It was great to see that we had people, Lions fans out in Los Angeles. And then we had a couple international ones too. Like there were a couple people in Canada, we had some people in Australia, and so there were like some cool things that we got to see when we were doing the show with that. But like in terms of working with other content creators, that wasn't something that I did a whole lot of. So as you've been on your journey here, it's been really great to see you. Like I said, I think networking has been kind of your superpower. Like you've definitely jumped in and sort of embraced it, and it's been really cool to see you in different spaces, interacting with different people. And I think number one, it's great because it gets you obviously the exposure to like their different audiences and things like that, and can help you sort of build your community. But the other cool thing is like there are definitely different ways of doing going about all this. So like you get that exposure with how other people are running their podcasts, or how they're what sort of their mindset is when they're creating content, and then like you can sort of you have the luxury then of being able to pick what works for them and what you kind of want to replicate, and sort of use that to build your own style. So I think it's definitely been great watching you sort of go through your journey so far, and hopefully excited to see what it looks like when you're 8 years into your your podcast career, and see how things have changed from what it's been. But I think like I said, a big fan of what you've been doing here with catching up with Cody, and excited to see what's in the future for you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, honestly, and I know I've said it a couple times on episodes and videos and stuff, but like even in the 1 year that I've been doing this, like even my setup, like I went from doing this on the kitchen table to now like
Mhm.
I have a desk. And I mean, eventually my goal is when we get a house and everything is to have like a small studio and everything. So yeah, it's really cool. I mean, even the last one I was on, how I'm getting invited to their studio. It's kind of cool. Like I can kind of, you know, even like with you and everything, like the ideas and like you having a podcast and that 8 years under your belt, I'm definitely going to be asking, a bunch of questions and just try to make the best I can is with what I have and the experience that other people have had. And that's kind of the one thing too that I like about the networking process is I've met people from, all ages, all backgrounds, and like that's what I want to do is start putting everything together as far as making the best podcast. And it helps in the day and age I think that I started in. You know, 8 years ago, I don't even know where I would start.
Mhm.
So obviously with technology, with AI and all this stuff, I mean, I've definitely used it to my advantage.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's another thing. And not that I want to be like the top podcast or anything like that, because I know I'll never get to that point. But I think just the technology in the day and age that we're in, like even these podcasts that started 2 or 3 years ago, kind of like in the beginning of all the technology and AI stuff, like to see how they went from point A to point B is even
Mhm.
crazy. Um, and yeah, I just reach out to people, and I've had people that want to come on and have come on, and I've had people that are like, it's not really my thing, and I don't take it personal or anything. I mean, everybody's at a different stage in their life, and some of the stuff it's for them, some of it's not. I've had Jamie on a couple times. She's not a huge fan of it, but
Mhm.
you know, like I said, just the networking thing is really a big thing that I never really thought I would be kind of partaking in. Um, but I've met cool people. I mean, honestly, a lot of time and I get support obviously, virtually and in person, but I would say more virtually is I've been getting more support that way. And I feel like it's because everybody's in that same boat.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, you're definitely dealing with people who can sort of relate to, like, because like you said, in theory, like doing a podcast doesn't seem like it's that hard, but once you start actually like doing it and you see kind of what all goes into it, people who are also doing it, who are also whether it be creating content in a podcast or if they're doing it through a different channel, like they definitely have an appreciation more so of what all is involved to make it happen. Especially when you're trying to do things consistently, like especially towards the later seasons with the Lions Grid, Jeffrey and I were trying to do at least 2 episodes a week. Like it takes a lot to coordinate being able to do 2 episodes a week.
yeah,
And it's
I don't even know how I would like start. And that's the one thing I need to start doing is like I focus on it here and there, but then there's sometimes like I'm like, dude, this is way too much. And I think it's because it's a solo podcast. So like
mhm,
I'm doing everything on top of working, on top of having a life.
yeah.
Um, so I mean, like I said, I give props to the people that are just starting out. I give props to people like you guys that have been doing it for 8 years. Um, and even like I said, some of the podcasts I watch and those top ones, it's like I give you guys props. And I know a lot of these guys have like, once they get to that point, they have teams and everybody that can help them, but
Mhm. Yeah,
it's a lot.
when you're a one man show, it is very difficult. And so yeah, and it's one of those things too where you get better as time goes on. Like you start to get down your systems and things like that, and as things become more routine, it becomes easier. But like even as stuff becomes easier, there are new challenges too as you grow. Like as soon as you start trying to do new things. So, but I mean I guess it's both a challenge and the like nice thing about it is that when you are doing it as a hobby, right? Like your livelihood isn't tied up into it. So I mean, it does make it difficult because you are having to make sacrifices, right? Like you said, you get done with it after you just had a day of work, like trying to find the time and like if you do have time, you have to dedicate it to this as opposed to maybe doing some other interest that you have. So that all becomes challenging. But like because it is a hobby, like you don't have to be as rigid with it, right? Like you can kind of build things and have it evolve over time so that it does fit like your schedule, your availability, and like you can sort of craft it to fit you, which is nice. Once it like if you do ever get to that level where it is maybe something where you can look at it as potentially being more than just a hobby, um, to your point, a lot of those people at that point in time, they have teams that help them facilitate things, and so it becomes a little bit different. But um, you know, the challenge is when it is a hobby, it does fall a lot on you. But the nice thing is then that you can kind of build it so that, how much ever effort you want to put into it, you can kind of find the tools, find the systems, find the people to help support you to operate at the level you want to, which is nice. It's definitely a process though, for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. And like when I did the podcast with my buddy, it was kind of hard too because you're basing it off of schedules and everybody's
Yep.
thing. So
Yeah.
that aspect, it's tough. But I mean, there's 100 different ways that it's a hell of a lot easier than it is being a solo guy doing this. But
Mhm.
we'll
Yeah, that
we'll get
honestly
through
was
it.
one of my favorite parts of podcasting, especially the last two seasons of the Lions Grid was doing it with Jeff. Having him, we've known each other for a long time. We go back all the way to middle school, but being able to have dedicated time with him every week, there were a lot of things I liked about podcasting, but like that was one of the really cool aspects was just being able to spend that time with a buddy and be able to talk, something that we're both passionate about. So, um, it's I know you've mentioned this too before on your podcast that it's kind of therapeutic also being able to get on here and kind of talk about things. So I know that's something I've enjoyed as well as just being able to get some of these ideas that only live in my head and be able to get them out is kind of it's definitely relaxing. It's freeing to be able to say some of these things instead of just having it be your internal monologue, which is great.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, it's nice to do it with like people that understand.
Yeah.
Like, it is the therapy because it's stuff that, the mental health part of it, of the podcast, that's nice to get off my, chest and talk and stuff like that. But like, even like with this stuff, like, it's just like chatting with a buddy,
Mhm.
and it's nice that it's somebody that relates to something and kind of sees things in different perspectives. And that's kind of what I like too with the networking is finding people in different, generations and everything like that because there's some things that I might not have thought of that they thought of. And
Mhm.
it's just kind of cool. Like the last guy I had on, he was a little bit older than I am. And it's kind of cool to see like what he grew up and how sports and mental health was when he was younger compared to now. And that's one cool thing. And like I said, yeah, I mean, it really is a therapy. I mean, it's a free therapy session for me, whether it's talking to a person or just talking to myself. And like I said, I mean, yeah, I don't get thousands and hundreds of views and likes and all that stuff. And sometimes it does get to me, but overall it's like if I can have one person enjoy it or one person relates to me, or to be honest, I mean, if it makes me feel better at the end of the day, that's really the most important thing. So, but
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, like I said, I really appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you taking time. I'm definitely going to be keeping in contact with you for future episodes and just kind of, whether it's sports talk or, getting some kind of feedback on podcasting stuff. Cause I'm sure you got a nice setup too with you being there doing it for 8 years. So I'll have technical questions and all sorts of things. Like I said, before we got on, I was talking about this mic that I got that I don't even know how to use it yet.
Mhm.
So, but no, I really do appreciate it. And, yeah, I mean, thanks a lot. I really do appreciate you taking your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally thrilled to be here and be on your show. And like I said, I've sort of been watching, your evolution over the journey, and it's great to see how much you've grown in the short amount of time. And then, it's going to be exciting to see how you continue to evolve. And it's yeah, always here to help, and certainly got a fan here in me for that you're catching up with Cody. So appreciate you having me on.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the support, and we'll definitely keep in touch. Alrighty, well, that was Kevin. I'll put all of his links in the description below. Yeah, it was really cool having him on, and thank you guys for catching up with Cody. It's only up from here. So like we were talking about at the end there, and the support, the networking, and everything like that. So glad to have him on. Thank you guys for supporting, and thank you guys for catching up with Cody. Peace.
It's time to catch up. Grab your headphones and fill your cup. Sports and life, I've got stories to share. Sit back, relax like you just don't care.